Okay, hi. We are doing a one-off chat, I guess, because this is it's a special request by Steve, who has a special interest in legibility. I also do actually. I think about it often. I don't think about it a lot. I haven't read Seeing Like a State. I don't know what you guys is how you guys approach legibility, but go ahead, Steve.
Yes. I guess I've been swimming in the ideas of legibility, but I don't think it was until I read Nadia's recent book, Anti-Memetics. I think that's what it's called, where she like really calls out the idea of legibility and how it metastasized from like political theory into tech from an essay that someone wrote about the book Seeing Like a State called, I think maybe it's called like a big little idea called legibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Oh, and then
Venkatesh Rao who wrote
yes,
that
and
up.
then I made fun of Venkatesh because I was like, well, the one thing that but Venkatesh clearly doesn't like legibility, and the way he writes is very illegible. So it's very funny that actually he does get as many readers as he does because it's actually really hard to read and understand what the fuck is the Michael Gervais theory or sorry, the sort of the office theory of like workplace politics when there's like 7 essays. And the same for legibility. Like I browse through his stuff and I'm like, okay, you just don't like it. Like, cool.
Yes, I think Henrik
Yeah,
made the point. Yes.
yeah. I made a point. You were saying like it's funny that legibility is an illegible concept, but the point is like in the scene we're in, the concept is illegibility. That's the sort of idea that was introduced, and like legibility
Yes.
is only kind of the anti-definition of this way of kind of being hard to read, right? Which is the goal for
Yes.
Venkat, right?
Yes. The Seeing Like a State, the book that talks about legibility, talks about it from the perspective of how states require legibility, and that kind of flattens the world in a way that causes bad effects. And so, yeah, the whole vibe of the idea of legibility is about how it's not so great, actually. And there's no like positive movement or someone like sticking a flag in the ground talking about what legibility is in a positive way and why it's a good idea, good thing.
Me, I want to steel man this thing for a bit. What are the bad effects that he focuses on? I don't maybe is it like sort of just
So
police
I
states
mean
and control?
the point that James Scott is making is that so when you have like the invention of the state and so on, like the growth of centralized states, what you see is that before that, people had very high context, like they were living in the village and they knew each other very well. So they could have very complex ways of understanding reality and each other, and they would have multiple names. They wouldn't have one last name. They would have different names depending on who they were talking to, and they would change ethnicities, and the city layouts would be labyrinths. It would be very hard to navigate, which was like terrible for the king. They said like everyone has to have the same last name, and the cities should all be on a grid so we can find the people we're taxing. It's so legibility in that sense, like where Scott is writing about it, is very useful if you try to control people, right? Because you can think about it as like how much context do you need to understand something. Like so something that is legible is it I mean, legible means readable, and I guess the point is that it's readable from someone who's outside of it, someone who's not having a lot of context. Something that is illegible will still be kind of readable if you have context. It's just a question of how much context do you need to understand this thing.
Yeah, I wonder if we can apply like an information theory lens to it. Is it like about number of bytes or like how many number of compressed bytes required to understand something? That's how legible it is.
So and I guess and then that idea has been sort of transferred to the internet. And so yeah. So the problem is you get dominated by kings, and people kind of like in history, people have self-barbarized. They've made themselves illegible. They've stopped using writing and gone to oral culture because it's hard to control. They've gone to forest gathering instead of making farms because farms are easier to taxate. So they've done things that are making them harder to control. And then that idea gets sort of applied to the internet where, you have algorithms and you have all of these mobs that are going around. And a way to protect yourself and to be able to work in public and find like-minded people without getting attacked by mobs and so on is by using similar techniques of making yourself harder to read in such a way that only people that have a lot of context on what you're doing understand what you're doing. So that's sort of the steel man for illegibility as a strategy.
I can add a little bit more, I feel like I see the downsides of illegibility in forms on the internet when you're filling out your address or your name or your ethnicity. Like, this is like seeing like a state, but in the internet age, it's become a little bit more precise. Like when someone is typing their last name in a form and their last name is one letter, because that's a normal thing where they're from, or two letters, and the form says no, it needs to be three letters to submit the form. That's an example of legibility, like flattening and not seeing the full richness of the way people want to be seen.
Yeah, I get
Addresses.
that all the time because I have a name before my first name, which is
Ah,
common in Sweden. And so every time I go abroad, they call me Per, which is like not, and I call myself Henrik because, but that if I go to the US, they will call me Per, right?
because
Which is,
Henrik is like, from a legibility perspective, is your middle name.
yeah, exactly. But like in Sweden, we understand the context that that's my real name, right?
I mean, my equivalence is so in Singapore we have English names and Chinese names. So my full name is Sean Wang Yuxian, which is SWYX, which is why I'll call Swix. But in the US they only have first name and last name. There's no, and then you'll have a middle name, but like the middle name, like my Chinese name comes after my last name. So then they just combine it. And so the main frustration is sometimes like I have been given issues that they still let me in because I'm like what the fuck? But like they still issues because my last name doesn't match because they combine my Chinese name into my last name. And then like sometimes like the system doesn't book my mileage because it's obviously the different names. So they can't handle first name last name. Yeah, so like okay, what you're saying is like compress everyone to a system to make the people who control the system more powerful, and they don't actually give a fuck about the individuals inside the system who may be more chaotic than the system that was designed. And I think that's like a very classic thing. I want to plug Flo Crivello's essay on the weird tomato principle. I don't know if either of you have read it.
Haven't.
Tomato Prince.
Yeah, it's a very similar thing where like at first you have to like at first there's like inherent variability and complexity, and then if you want to sort of industrialize it and scale it up, you have to like fit it into a system. And then and his example was the weird tomatoes, like
This is the
normal
heirloom tomato, I
it
think.
is a form that's a type of industrialized tomato. But he was like, we are not like selecting tomatoes because they're the juiciest or the healthiest for us. We're selecting tomatoes because they're the easiest to fit in machines. Why? Because we need machines we need to make tomatoes legible to machines so that we can industry farm it. And that's what we eat.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It was about org charts, right? I watched this talk like a year or two ago. No?
It's about everything. This is like legibility is everything, right? It's from like tomatoes to org charts to like how police states govern us, but also it's how Google crawls our web pages.
I want to find this thing. So it's Flow.
Weird Crivello weird tomato principle. I think if you just type weird tomato principle, you'll see it. Or like I don't know.
Tough Tomato Principle.
Yeah, tough tomato.
Yes, yes. And it's right there in the top, quoting, "The medium is a message and sing like a state." Perfect. I'm excited to read this blog post. This is awesome.
It's just like, I think like one of the things about it as being an author is having anecdotes in your pocket that other people haven't heard about. But like, it's like, oh yeah, this links to a thing that you know about. But it's new because here's a new example that you haven't heard about. And he's very good at that.
Yeah, this someone, I think someone at Linear, maybe like someone high up at Linear, the technology company, gave a talk about how org charts should be more like heirloom tomatoes, and that like they're not like the prettiest looking thing, but they taste delicious, which is related, but a different artifact to that video than this essay. Sorry.
So I'm thinking like one big reason why illegibility became a popular concept around the time. I mean, it became popular around the time that like social media was maturing. And it's very closely connected to the idea that like with scenes and people kind of LARPing in scenes and like taking over, and you have all these sociopaths that come in and break scenes. Like how do we actually like create creative scenes where bring people together in such a way that the nerds can find each other and like build common knowledge and start to build their things without like becoming like a legible status game that like these careerists can come in and destroy, which is like it always happens anyway, but like becomes such a acute problem with like Twitter because it's so scalable that you have to be very sort of careful about how you navigate that in order to not have your like cozy little bubbles destroyed.
I don't think very much about the networks being hacked by careerists. It seems to me like it's so easy to tell who's the careerists from the legit people. You don't think so?
Yeah. Nah, you think everyone is like you?
I think everyone is like me. What do you mean? You think
You think
it's
everyone?
hard?
You think?
You're saying it's harder for other people to tell who's the legit people in the network?
Yeah, they're like, oh my God, this guy has LinkedIn certification for JavaScript. He must be amazing at JavaScript.
Well, that's not the. So I think like the network that the three of us are in, like the
Yeah, different network.
I guess, Teapot, for example, this part, and I'm saying, not capital Teapot, like the part of Twitter that the three of us are in
Yeah,
is like, I'm not worried about people hijacking this network, because I think if you can fool the three of us that you're like, that you belong, then you actually do belong.
sure.
Do you just,
But it is very hard to scale.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about scaling it. I don't know, Henrik, are you worried about people fooling you somehow? What are you worried about?
I think that, there's a big trade-off between, I struggle with that in my line of work, right? Between scale and shaping a good scene around what you're doing. Because like the more people that get involved, and especially certain kinds of people, you get the context collapse, and it's harder to, and we're social beings, so we get like, we sort of start to internalize a little bit like what's going on around you and the expectations, and that's going to make it harder to explore the edges. Like, so if you want to have these pockets of like high taste, high context nerds, they are able to create a culture which makes it easier to sort of be nimble around the edges of like the field, or like what to do. Well, once more people get in there and so on, people will start performing in other ways, and that will make them less nimble. Like, even if they're trying to do it, it's very hard not to be affected by the knowledge of the other people.
Do you have an example of a time like increased legibility led to this happening? Like, I don't know if we want to call out certain people or instances, but in theory, this stuff is like on Twitter. You could be like, look, this tweet made something legible. This person, because of the legibility, this person did something bad.
It's hard to tell. It's the classical thing with all scenes. So you have like punk rock, right? And it's illegible and weird. And at some point it becomes a money machine, and it just transforms, and the people who are doing the good music sort of end up leaving. And so that it happens over and over again. I feel it in my own work, like when I've wrote for like 300 people, and like it was you, Steve, and like a few others, I felt it was very easy to just like do whatever was on my mind and be very illegible. But like now it's 45,000. It's hard to not have in the back of my mind that like there's going to be so many people, like, will they understand this? And even if I'm trying, like I try hard not to think about that and not have that affect what I pay attention to, and like not care that people get offended or find me confusing. I'm still having to think about that. I'm still like wasting resources, like trying to protect myself. Whereas before, when I was in a smaller bubble, like it wasn't even a problem, something that I have to work on. And I see, I don't want to point to people, but you see that a lot of times where people go bigger and they just lose it. They stop being interesting. They gets destroyed. I'm not going to name any names.
One of the things this brings me to one of the things you pointed out on Twitter, Henrik, that we have one concept, legibility, and then we have another concept being like publicness. I wish I had put the word public in another tense. The amount of public, degree of public, and so what you're talking about, going from 300 people to 45,000 people, is an increased degree to how public your writing is.
Yeah.
And that increased degree of publicness has made you want to be less legible, more legible, or just...
I think the default thing that happens is that you want to be more legible. It's of hard to let people down. Like, people are reading your stuff and they're kind people that you don't want to offend them or confuse them. that I think there's still like a natural social instinct in wanting to sort of fit in or something. I think that's quite common. And then I have to sort of counteract that by like forcing myself to be more illegible. Like it's okay. I mean, because I literally like my salary will go down if I'm illegible, and so there's like a clear signal that is like reinforcement learning me to be more legible. And like the more I simplify myself, the more I make myself legible and compress my identity into some kind of amputated version of myself, the more money I earn. So there's like a very dangerous kind of reinforcement learning thing going on there.
There's a U curve where I think the people who are somehow like don't earn the right to not give a shit then become more illegible again, and it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I see. So you start off illegible, then you become
You're legible for the mids, and then you're like, fuck this, I don't need it.
upside down you. Like, so more legible is high. So you start off illegible, you become super legible, and then like
and then you've earned the right to be illegible.
This makes me think of David Byrne from the Talking Heads, who started out super illegible, and that's what made him like a sensation. And then later in his life, he wrote this musical about I forget her name, the wife of a dictator. Have you guys heard of Here Lives Love?
It's from Argentina. Perón, Evita Perón, or is it that one?
About the Imelda Marcos from the Philippines. And it's an amazing, amazing musical that he wrote that like very few people that I found have heard of it, but for some reason, my dad loved it and we listened to the soundtrack when I was a kid. Anyways, it makes me think of how famous. I'm sure there are a lot of examples. You guys, Henrik, I'm sure you have much more better examples of people.
I mean, that's a common way of like people. Yeah. Like, because either you become Coldplay, like, which is as we like, that's a good path, right?
Yeah.
Or you become like Radiohead, as like we were talking about that the other time. Like, who are like they are reinvesting every time they earn more money, like, and get more leeway. They're reinvesting that into making weirder and weirder music.
In theory, this could be like, you could think of like a second time or third time founder as someone who does this. Like Mitchell Hashimoto, like left, the Terraform company and started just like playing around in his terminal, and everyone was like, "What are you doing, buddy?" And now it's like, "Oh crap! This is really cool. Now everybody's using it again. Like he's back. Like it again caught on. And he's back legible."
Yeah.
I think he's still pretty legible. I don't think he's weird enough. He could be weirder.
I think he's in a legible period right now.
But I think it's telling, like that point, like the point where he's between ideas, he needs to go down in some more illegible space. Like if he was trying to do like keynote speeches about all the steps there in the middle, like that would have messed it up.
Yes,
and it would have messed it up completely.
And this is your advice in Looking for Alice, which you gave to me before the blog post, which is that in the early stages of a relationship, don't worry about, like, legibility is harmful.
Yeah, cool. Because it means
yet, and yet so many people find their matches on Tinder, and the funnel, the legibility there is picture, and then 2 sentences about yourself. That's it, right?
Yes. And you can go even more extreme to Date Me Docs, which I'm the big proponent for, which is as legible as it gets. I spent hours and hours and hours optimizing my legibility in this Date Me Doc.
Yeah. But I mean, if we're going to talk about like the good thing about legibility, and I think before this, I think it's better to think about it in terms of like context. Like, how much context do you need, and who has that context? Like, it's more of a high dimensional thing. It's like with a Date Me Doc, you make yourself legible, but you probably add a lot of like dog whistles and weird things in there to signal to certain people.
Yes.
So it's controlling the audience. It's not like it's legible and illegible. It's like legible to whom, and like what information is going through to whom, and it's obviously very useful to get the right information across to the right person. And sometimes that's one person, sometimes that's 100,000 people. But I think that's really what we're talking about, like who understands what.
I think it's a really important point that I'm just realizing now, that dog whistling is a really important technique in the legibility arsenal.
Yeah.
If you want to be legible to the right people, but you don't want to upset the wrong people, you need to find a word. And I did this in my Date Me Doc. I can show you guys the words. You have to find words that don't offend people, but like the right person, hears it and gets it.
Yeah, encoding secret message. Yeah, yeah. I learned the word is steganography. That's the word, steganography.
Steganography.
It's sort of encoded legibility. It's very funny.
Nice. Yeah, like for example, one word that I put in my date me doc is optimistic.
Mm.
And do you guys know what that word is coding for?
I mean, to me, that is
You like,
Peter Thiel. That is like Builder. That's Peter Thiel.
yeah, you like progress.
Yes.
You'd like technology.
Yes.
But it could sound like you're a Apple chic boy as well.
Well, sorry, that was in the section of what I'm looking for. Like I'm looking to date someone who's optimistic because here in Brooklyn, a lot of the people I'm dating think the world's about to end, or the people I was dating. Yeah, yes, yeah. I'm not interested in dating a decel, exactly.
And it's funny.
But like
So
they will not think that they are not optimistic. They just haven't thought.
yeah, that word just like reads them like sure, whatever. Like they just keep reading. They don't filter themselves out
Yeah. Okay.
necessarily, or maybe they do.
Well,
I don't know.
actually, that's bad.
Yeah, well, okay, yes, it's true. I think maybe some of them do filter themselves out. Yes, you're right. I think they actually do filter themselves out in the right way. The people that it passes by is like moms and grandmas, and like I designed my date me doc to be bulletproof. Like anyone in the world can read it, and like no one gets offended. But like the filtering mechanisms work. But like no one like thinks I'm a bad guy.
Yeah. In case someone like shows it to their mom, like, do you think this is a good guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But what if the mom has read Peter Thiel?
Yeah. Well, if the mom's read Peter Thiel, like that's the daughter I want to date.
Yeah.
But I guess going back to where I want to start this conversation, I love the legibility is good, but it has harms, and I definitely think it has harms when it's applied from states and it compresses people. But I'm mostly thinking about it from the perspective of making oneself more legible in a way that, Sean, you've done a great job of building in public, increasing your luck, increasing your surface area on the internet. Or Henrik, I feel like the two of you in different ways have talked about this. So Sean like kind of leads the build in public, learn in public world, which really increases your legibility to the world, shows the world what you know and how you think. And then Henrik has this amazing blog post entitled "A blog post is a long and interesting search query that routes interesting people and ideas to your inbox." Roughly, that's the title. And I think both of those movements and ideas are central to what I think about when I advise young people or people in my lives to be more legible on the internet, to like increase their luck, increase their surface area, increase the people who find them on the internet and they can do amazing things with.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's something I tell people all the time too. Like, just put your stuff online, like put something online so people can find you. And again, sort of the value in thinking about legibility is that I think a lot of people, when they do that, like they have their weird selves and all their interests, and then they go online and then they do like LinkedIn stuff, right? They kind of think they have to talk in a certain way online or like in public, and they actually remove important information from the search query because like they're putting out stuff that is supposed to be attracting the right type of people, but because I think a lot of people are too legible, or they think like they have to remove the weirdness, that they only have to have one interest, like they're the guy on this topic or something, like, and they simplify it too much and they write in very simplified ways. And that actually removes a lot of information from their quote unquote search query, which makes it harder to find the right people for them. And so like to push yourself a little bit more, like, I mean, of course, you want to be very clear, like if you're looking for a specific thing, or I am looking for a job, or I am doing this kind of thing, you want to make that clear, but you also want to make the prompt like that we're putting into the thing detailed enough that the output is what you're expecting. And yeah, I find that a very like useful way of thinking about the internet. It's like a search engine, and like you try to input different things, and then you get output, and you can sort of validate. It's just that's when you're with a language model. Like if the prompt isn't working, you change the prompt until you get the behavior from Twitter or Substack or YouTube. When you get the behavior you want from that, like the right kind of people, the right kind of book recommendations, projects, then you've dialed in the thing right.
It sounds to me, sorry to interrupt. I would love to, I'm going to say a quick thing and I want to turn over to Sean. Henrik, you talk a lot about like how you appear to a search engine. and you have a search engine metaphor, and then now your metaphors are about like LLMs finding you, kind of, or like you're prompting the internet, and it makes me feel like this whole conversation would be different without Google, without AI, and like it's like making oneself legible to Google. It's kind of like seeing like a Google, like seeing like a state, seeing like a Google, seeing like an LLM. It depends on what is, because we're all just people. Like, yeah, it depends what is doing the seeing and the aggregating and what information landscape we're in. I think that's very important. I'm sorry, I wasn't more precise about that. Sean, maybe you can help me out.
No, I think one thing I tell people there, okay, so a lot of people are like, I am a unique snowflake. I'm not like other girls. I am, I contain many multitudes. How dare you simplify me? Like, this is beneath me. And I'm like, to that, I just say like, legibility is an act. Is a,
Sure.
it's an onboarding, right? Like
Yes.
there are different layers to you. And the first layer, you should probably design that, and then you can be your complex, messy self later on. But like, you should probably want to design your first layer, right? Like, there is such a thing as signal to noise ratios, and if you put out too much noise, then nobody knows what the hell to think of you when they first encounter you. So you might as well design the first impression. And so that often is in the form of like your homepage, your LinkedIn, your whatever, and right down to your tagline. Tagline, sweat it down to 2 words.
What's your tagline?
I don't know. As far as that one is concerned, I'm happy being illegible right now
Okay.
because like I have 3 jobs, whatever. Like I don't fit.
As long as I've known you, you've been very public but illegible. It's always difficult for me to know what your job is.
For like okay, 2016 to 2022, I was React DevRel guy, right? That's fine, and then like, but I just like, the 2 words is like the most condensed legible form of like what you call yourself when you say, hi, I am blah, or I do blah for blah, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson is my classic one. I'm your personal astrophysicist, 2 words,
Aw.
right? Like, it's very, very like, okay, like no one else has that. You have that. From there on out, that's where I think, right? Like, and that's super legible. Of course, there's other shit going on, but like that's
For a
yeah.
period of time, I was a professional Brett Victor fanboy. That's what I've said about myself.
Right, but like, that doesn't like give you much uniqueness because there's many.
At the time, it felt like I was the only one.
Who wants to occupy unique addresses? Yeah, too many collisions is not good for you.
Henrik, sorry, we can go back to you, Sean, but Henrik, do you have a quick tagline for yourself?
No. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I probably no. I am a unique snowflake. So like, I am that girl.
Not like other girls. Yeah, it's great. Okay, so mine is probably AI engineer. Like that's the thing I landed onto here.
Yeah.
And like, I'll probably have that the rest of my life. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I'm pretty sure I write essays and then a link to my blog. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sean, AI engineer, that's the name of your conference, and you were like
Well, I'm associated with the rise of the AI engineer, and like, as that industry grows, I will grow, and people will be like, oh yeah, that's the guy that like started it.
And you are you yourself like the prominent AI engineer, or you're like the guy who?
No, I'm just the guy who called it out, and the guy who like sort of put out the community together, and the conference, and I joined a company that is like sort of building the AI engineer, that kind of stuff, right? So, there's a through line that is a thicker funnel than others who, like, let's say Neil deGrasse Tyson is a very narrow line, but like it's still a cohesive, like, here's a funnel, and I think like that's very helpful for people. And I'm just saying, like, okay,
Yeah.
one form of this, right, is you're on social media and you're like, well, okay, like I got to a certain point, like I'm happy, and then like you start posting more. But sorry, you got to a certain point. I think Henrik is like touching on this a little bit. Like, I have such a responsibility to like such a large audience now. I got to like, have these high signal to noise and all that. But I have this tension of like, well, I got to be my full self. Like, I have other interests, all this. And I think for me, the way I've resolved that is just have a main that is high signal to noise. That's the simple rule is, do you like, people should have notifications on for you, or this is the first thing people should see about you? Every time you show up, it's like the first thing people should see is like that.
I see.
That's your main. And then just have an alt that has everything else. That's it. It's like Insta girls have Finstas. And then so for men, who are thought boys on the internet, they see that on Twitter.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
And so do you have an alt Twitter account?
Yeah, I do. I mean,
What's
it's pretty
what's the
public.
handle?
It's Swix.io. I link to it every now and then for people,
Huh.
but it's not. Yeah,
Swix after duck. All right, I clicked follow. I have to wait to be approved. I'm so
yeah.
curious.
You're part of the crowd. You have to fill out an application. Anyway, so I'm happy to move on topics. Because there's like other stuff unless you guys have commentary.
Yeah. No, but it's clearly the case that like my strategy is like suicide from like an economic perspective. It like made it so hard for myself to earn money doing what I do because I wanted to buy so much eligibility. But I thought that was a good kind of luxury consumption because that bought me the ability to be a snowflake and to, that allowed me to navigate more nimbly in all of my interests and more rapidly kind of move toward the things that I want to do. But it did clearly like cost me several years of like slow growth and so on.
All I'm saying is I think you can have your cake and eat it too. The theory is just levels of legibility, right? You have the front door, which is very legible. You have a mailing address, and then once you enter the front door, it can be as messy as you want. But people have to find the front door.
You know, Simon Wilson, I think, does this explicitly, and I love it. He has at the bottom of his essays on his website a call to action to sign up for his paid newsletter, and the call to action is pay me for me to send you less.
Yep.
It's like you can get all my stuff for free on my website, but it's an overwhelming amount. Pay me and I'll send you the best shit.
Yeah, so that's a signal for high signal to noise. That's a dog whistle for high signal to noise. And like you always want to sprinkle those in. Like
he converted me immediately, even though like I read all of his shit. Like I don't need to pay him to send me less. I just was like, oh my god, this is the best.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, that was placed there for you. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a little bit more of like for engineers or technical people, developers. I think like a lot of and so by the way, part of my whole thing for companies is that companies also need to be legible, right?
Yes, of course.
My career as a developer relations person is a lot of like, well, you think you're a unique snowflake, but or like you think you worked really hard on this, therefore you deserve attention. Actually, no one gives a shit. Like, where do you stand? How do people slot you in the broader narrative of like what's going on? And like that's my job, but also you guys at products in engineering suck because you don't think about this at all.
Yes.
And like and it's really frustrating for me because like you think it's my job. No, like it's our job. And so like there's a lot of work to do make companies legible. Like a lot of founders like are not good at making their companies legible. Steve, I think you really do a good job of that one image that represents Valtown. That is the most legible thing I've ever fucking seen from any company. Like that like does what you do. That's great. You spend a lot of time doing that. I think legibility is a different axis from like value or TAM, let's call it. But you are very legible, right? Like you have to find the TAM, but you are very legible. And I think like that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And then same for LLMs, same for Google search. So I just want to like anyone listening who's like think legibility is like a politics thing. It is not just a politics thing. It's not just a dating thing. It's not just like a marketing thing or like as a writer. Like no, actually it's like also business. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just quickly. Sorry, go for it.
As the like the snowflake here, but I can also like so when I was writing and doing the snowflake writing, I did have a job, and there I like was totally extremely legible, but like that was just a separate life. It was an art gallery, and it was very interesting to like do that work because the problem with that gallery when I started there was that it was illegible. Like people didn't understand what it was, and so they had trouble selling stuff. And then I basically renamed the place to just like it's art gallery, like that was a little bit more because there's like a specific type of art in on the island where I'm living, which is like famous diamonds, and I just like named this place after that kind of art. It's super simple. People are looking for that. And then I went and stood like at the entrance and like asked everyone and tried to explain to everyone what we were because everyone was confused. And I did that over and over and over again for like 3 or 4 weeks until I could like condense down into like 4 sentences in a way that people understood what we were and they got excited about it. And then I used that explanation as part of the name and then changed our copy. And, like you do that kind of thing where you're trying to figure out, and then we had like 2 sentences, and when we told everyone who came in there, and then that was easy for them to repeat to other people they met, and suddenly we like tripled the customers that came in there.
Oh yeah. Legibility is not you saying things, it's your customers saying things to their friends. Yes, it's word of mouth.
Exactly.
Sorry, Steve, I muted you.
I had so much that I wanted to say that I was like, I just got to write it all down to put it on Twitter later. I will mute myself next time. I was going to say, when we talk about startup legibility, Schwicks, what you were talking about sounds to me like what Ariel Jackson calls positioning or branding. She's like a branding positioning expert. I took her class. I've consulted with her. I've read her blog posts online many times. And I think it has a lot to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Making yourself legible to customers.
And I think Henrik was talking about LLMs at some point. I think a lot about LLMs, obviously. And this whole oh man, Netlify, my former company, has this whole thing about agent experience where you must make new things for agents, specifically for agent consumption. And I've always had an issue. Because that is legibility for AI, right?
Yes.
It's legibility for humans and there's legibility for AI. And my contention is that they should be one and the same thing. Obviously, they are not today, but that is a local flaw that we should not be too hung up about. But here we are turning every website into an LLMs.txt that is a plain text thing for people to consume. Here we are making MCPs of APIs because the LLMs can't figure out APIs themselves. Here we are making skills because no developer wants to read docs anymore. They just want to read docs as markdown files as skills, right? It's all this busy work. It's bullshit. This will go away.
I think
legibility. That is also legibility. Legibility is fluff.
I think I have a new insight to bring to the group. Legibility sounds to me like it has to do a lot about interfaces. An API is extremely legible. A really well-designed website is extremely legible. An LLM is a text file, like good docs are extremely. So I think, legibility. Legibility is a principle of an interface, maybe like a really well-designed interface. A really legible interface is one that's easy to work with.
And self-discoverable, like self-documenting it almost as well. If you don't have enough information, the very good JSON schema links to more information about the JSON schema if you need.
Yeah, and it's also with the interface. It's what is it interfacing with? Because it's legibility. Because as you were saying, so you have APIs. Claude Code isn't so good at interfacing with APIs, so then you create an interface with MCPs that are better fitted to that. So it also depends on what's the audience for this interface.
Yes. And if it's a human eyeball, then it needs to be a website because humans want to look at things.
AI is supposed to be to serve us, and we're not supposed to serve AI. So what the fuck are we doing here? We're giving in to okay, we'll bend, we'll make ourselves legible to the AI instead of just trying to make the AI serve us or fit our way of life.
Yeah, these are all, as you said, these are all short-term optimizations. And in the end, the bitter lesson will continue to be true. And
I don't know that. I actually this is one of those things where no, actually if we keep going down this road, they will be our overlords. Yeah.
Well, I guess then if they continue to gain agency, then LLMs being legible to other LLMs will be increasingly important as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. This has been so fun. I wrote down a bunch of notes, which we can go over, but before I do, where do you want to take this in the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking about because you made the point to me the other day about I was complaining about my book funnel is not keeping up with my book consumption, and you make it legible. And I think then that was really good advice, and I think I'm starting to move in that direction. And again, I think that has to do with I've gotten bigger, and then it's just the way I interact with Twitter and so on. It's harder to just go in and oh, I'm looking for, it becomes it feels more like I'm going out on stage or something, and to just push through that and I'm actually looking for precisely this book and treat it as a search engine. Again, it gets harder, but I have to actively sort of re-engage with that way of doing it. But I started doing it a little bit more. It's been lovely. So it's always a good idea. Is that explain precisely what you want, right? What is it you're looking for? Explain that in very clear words, precisely. Thank you for reminding me to do that.
Great. Oh man, I just wrote down 4 bullet points of replies to what you just said.
Good. Okay, start with first one.
I kind of want to start with the last one because that's most related to what you finished with, which is explaining clearly what it is that you want and putting it out on the internet. Sounds a lot like this dumb book, not dumb, but there's this book and documentary called, I think, The Wish, that made its way, like it was like kind of hot in America like 15 years ago. And it's basically like believe in wishful thinking is like the message of the book, and like put out into the universe what you want, like sit down there and visualize it and talk about it and just put into the universe that you want a husband, that you want $1 million, like whatever you want. And like the world will find a way to bring it to you. And it was a very mystical kind of book, but without any mysticism. I'm super, I think what legibility is about is putting what you want into the universe so that you can find it. So you better know what it is. So you better know how to recognize it even, so that people on the internet can route it to you if they want to be nice, or if they are the thing you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's wishful thinking is like, it can really work if you do it in the right way. I really like that kind of exercise where you ask yourself like, okay, so where would I want to be in 5 years from now, and then like, how do I get there in 10 months? Because when you do that's sort of wishful, that's the sort of same thing, but then you're like, wow, I need to do my life completely different if I'm gonna get there in 10 months. And then that's usually a quite good forcing function. You realize, oh, I need to actually change a lot of my habits, and I need to reach out to people, and I need to do things that are very uncomfortable to me to accelerate like that. And I really like to do that exercise a lot. It's just, so that's a kind of wishful thinking, but in a more painful way.
Yes, I would think about that as self-legibility. So like a big part of why I tell people to write down what they want in a partner, and why like the date me directory, sometimes I say, is a big con. I'm telling people, if you write down who you want, they'll leap off the page. And that is true. But more importantly, I'm getting people to sit down and think incredibly thoughtfully about who they are and what they want in a relationship, and refine that over time in writing, so that they become a better person, or become a clearer person. When they meet people, they get a better sense of if it could be a fit. They elucidate their own values to themselves and others. I'm tricking people to be more thoughtful. So in some sense, this self-legibility process, even if you don't share your legibility with the outside world, if you just do it for yourself, even that's super useful. But then when you go the extra step of sharing it with even a single person, that extra rigor in the mirror of another person just magnifies it, and it's legibility so magical.
Yeah, that's a funny. That's the like secret, like Straussian reading of Date Me Dogs.
Sorry. I think you may have used the word secret incidentally, but I think it wasn't called The Wish. I think it was called The Secret, the book that I was talking about. The secret. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I find that so useful to just like do different kinds of exercises where I'm like trying to articulate what I could do, and like and often like adding a zero after, or like not in terms of money, but in terms of just like not limiting myself, and then maybe I'm not going for the full big thing, but just like to see a vaster scope of possible things, and as you're saying, like figure out my values and priorities. Yeah.
So what you're reminding me there is about, in the beginning when we were talking about legibility and illegibility and how you need both. To me, that sounds very similar to how in programming there's top-down design and then there's bottoms-up design, and how you always get into trouble if you only do one. And Brett Victor's essay, Climbing Up and Down the Ladder of Abstraction, is really good here to elucidate this. I think there are a lot of symptoms of problems are because of too much reliance on top down or bottoms up. And so legibility is about being abstract and super high level from the top. So like, who am I? What do I even want? Is there a faster way to get what I want? Can I get it 10 times faster? That's all from the top, abstract. And if you stay there, then you're an ideas person who doesn't accomplish anything. You have to take that and then trickle it down to the bottoms up, and then actually so maybe Swix is coming back. So you have to so then at the bottom, you actually take action in the world, and you find things out about the world that you didn't know about at the top level. And then you have to let that stuff bubble up to the top, change your goals, and even change who you are as a person. to me super important. And that's what brings it full circle. Like you want to be legible, you want to have high level thinking, but then you also need to be illegible down at the bottom to give you the freedom to explore in the actual reality of the world, and then let that, what you learn, bubble up into your next legibility.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting because me and Swix, because we're definitely like, I am more toward the illegible side, hi Swix, and you're more to the legible side. And I would sort of imagine that Swix, we were talking about like having some clarity about sort of next steps to where we are going, like top-down design versus bottom-up design, and you need both. And I kind of imagine that you have a little bit more clarity from the top than I have. That you have. Do you have a sense of like where you're going in the next few years?
One thing I wanted to say is that I just looked on Twitter briefly to like see how many followers each of you have relative to me. And I think I am someone who wants to be like more legible and in some sense get more followers. And the two of you are ahead of me and you have been more legible and you have more followers. And so now I think part of why it seems like I'm concerned with being more legible and you guys are concerned with being less legible, I think is where we are in the journey.
Yeah, and there's an ego thing, right? Because by no means are Henrik or I actually famous in any way, right? Like, so like, yeah, it's absolutely like a self-perception ego thing. Yeah.
That hurts. This is my snowflake feelings.
You understand what I mean, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah, I know
definitely
what
have
you
a
mean.
lot
I
of
know what you mean.
low ego thing.
So I have a
I love U curves. Okay. So the normal U curve is like, oh, you do not stop until you are the true blue, like A-lister or whatever. And then the U curve from there is, well, I have enough. Those guys do not have enough. And that's the one thing they cannot have. And so like this, like, there's this balancing sort of duality of like, one, is it ego or is it sufficiency, self-satisfaction? That like, I'm good where I am. It could be ego. You don't know.
You cut up a little bit there. But I guess one thing I want to talk about, because we haven't even talked about it at all yet, is actual legibility, like the ability for the human eye to process information, because I think that is important. Like, Swix talked about it a little bit. Like, is your website easy to read from an onboarding perspective to your product? Is it clear to understand what this product does, what its competitor, what it's contrasting itself to? But I want to go even deeper and just get to like raw legibility. Is the font able to be read? Is the size of it right? Is the columns good? Like now we're getting into Brett Victor, Edward Tufte kind of stuff. Like if you want to make a relationship over time more legible, you show it on a chart, not a data table. Like Arabic numerals are more legible than numbers written out in English. I think that like mechanics of legibility isn't, while it's not like what we're talking about, like the concept of being legible to the world, I think it's also very important. That stuff I think about a lot.
But I think it's deeply related to the other things too, because anything where you're trying to get information across, like you communicate to someone else, you have to take into account like their working memory and their pre-existing knowledge and attention span and all that. And I think I do pay a lot of attention to stuff like that when I'm shaping my stuff, even though like it might be illegible in some ways, or like actively trying to repel certain types of readers. It's still very, I try to package it such that it's easy to read.
I think this relates to what Swix was saying earlier about how we make things, we're like bending over backwards to make our stuff legible to LLMs, and how that's like a bad thing. And in some sense it obviously is, but in another sense it's just a natural extension of being legible. Like we have so my website is legible to people, you can log in and use the website. My website is legible to code, you can like use my SDK my API, my SDK to program against Valtown's API. And now, because a new audience for me is an LLM, I have a new set of interfaces, LLM.txtfile, MCP, etc., that are legible, that are especially legible to that audience. So in some sense, it's just
you increase your surface area of luck by like putting in that effort of being understandable by LLMs.
Yes. So like I'm taking seriously the limitations and the strengths of the entity to whom I'm trying to be legible for.
I want to double click on something you said, Swix, where you were like provoking me a little bit, talking about ego. I find it like an interesting point to think about that. Illegible is very nice emotionally because you can get to be your entire self, but it's doing a disservice to other people. You're not able to serve other people as much as you could if you made it clear to them how you could service them, or all that stuff. So it's interesting to think about that. Yeah, illegibility can be kind of selfish in a sense.
What's the question? What's the topic?
I was just kind of repeating something you said,
I wasn't.
repackaging.
I think that's what you took away. I wasn't actually saying exactly that. It was more that um, this phase that you and I sort of tasked ourselves to be in, where you're like, oh, like, I'm okay being more legible because I made it in some way. That's entirely self-constructed, right? Like, to other people, to your future self, you may not have made it,
Mhm.
but like that's like a backwards rationalization of, well, you're not putting in the work to be legible right now. You could be, and you're not.
And the trade-off. I mean, it's so different. Like, because when I was working at the art gallery and doing that work, it was very clear. Like, the goal state was very clear. Like, the only thing I was trying to do was like channel customers to artists. So like find good artists and connect them with buyers. They would, like, I had a very simple thing I was trying to do, and I could optimize that very hard. Whereas where I'm doing now, it's like it's sort of an exploit kind of trade-off that I'm dealing with, because I've honed in on certain things that could be valuable to other people that I could be writing about, and I could make that more legible and like grow the blog to be 300,000 readers and help a lot of people by doing that. But that would trade off my ability to explore and discover the new ideas, and the ideas that are good and that have resonated with people I've been able to find because I was illegible, because I did not do what was expected of me, and that I'm navigating that way. So there's kind of a trade-off when you're doing this kind of work that has a lot of exploration in it, that the ideas are not that you could I guess I could go into like an exploit stage where I'm like exploiting my best ideas and making them legible over and over again, and being very helpful to people. So
Yeah.
it's
So I'm familiar with these trade-offs. I have a concept for it called learning gears, which I've written about as part of the Learning Public series of essays. And so like there's an explore gear, and then there's an exploit gear, and there's two other gears. But the main idea is that like you just have different channels for those, right? Have an explore channel, and then use your main channel for exploit, something like that, right?
Mhm.
Or if you want to, you can flip those. But don't I feel like sometimes you have this limiting assumption that you must have this trade-off, and that's the iron rule of the universe. And like my observation is that other people have found a way around it. So if you
Yeah.
want to, it's there. If you don't want to, it's fine. Like
Mhm.
sometimes limiting beliefs, the most impactful thing someone can tell you is that like that spoon doesn't exist. It's up to you.
Yeah. So maybe like the twist here is it's gonna be revealed that like my supposedly internet famous account, that's actually my alt, and like there's gonna be released a main that is super legible. So
There
this
you
is like
go.
what you've seen so far is only the alt.
I think it's probably the other way around. You can just continue to make this existing channel more legible, and then you start a new alt.
Yeah. Maybe.
That's what I've
But
seen other people in your position do. They start with a weird side thing, but then that thing succeeds beyond their wildest expectations, and then they continue to make it more and more legible. Because that's the thing. Like Chat GPT. Like, what a terrible, dumb name. They never intended it to be anything more than a prototype, but they're stuck with the name because that's the name.
yeah. It's funny because they did buy chat.com, but like no one uses that.
Yeah, and maybe eventually they'll turn it into that.
Yeah, but it gets harder and harder every day.
Yeah. So 15.5 is this management principle from Patagonia. And like I implemented legibility in my org chart when I was working at a bigger company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is Elon's question, and like I think in general, like employees reporting up to their managers, up all the way up the chain, that is a form of legibility that the management needs to like know how the business is going. And then there's also legibility going the other direction, where management needs to tell people what the vision, direction of the company is, what the main initiatives of the company are, etc. And then we already talked about legibility to customers. And Swick said the key is how customers talk to other customers about you when you're not in the room. That's what legibility, that's like the true test of legibility. Or when you're selling an enterprise business and they advocate for you internally, you being more legible helps them explain you to other people in the business. how well you are legible to investors when you're pitching your startup. That's called an elevator pitch. That's like the ledger, or your slide deck. Like that's the legible thing that investors understand. Or like I think a real VC funding round. Like I don't know if Swix disagrees, but I feel like when you can analogize your business to a successful business that already exists, that's really when like your pitch is nailed. You're like my app is Uber for cats, like that kind of thing. People make fun of it, but that's a really strong way to be legible.
Yeah, and that's layer one legibility. You can be a special snowflake after that, but you probably should clear about the
Yeah,
front door.
exactly. There's legibility to public markets. That's all the stuff that companies release, and that's super highly regulated for all the reasons, to avoid securities issues, to avoid like fraud and whatnot, and runs on banks. Which made me think about how prices are interfaces, and prices are super legible. Like when you like slap a price on something, or when you can watch a price of a stock, like what could be more legible than this number is how much you could buy this thing for? Like, what incredible legibility. And I think there are a lot of things in society that we don't want to put prices on. And that instinct is resisting legibility. This thing does have a value, and in theory, if you gave me money for it, I would do it. But like me refusing to put a public price on this thing is me resisting legibility, which is a good thing in a lot of instances.
And I guess like you have all these like climate pricing where they're trying to put prices on
Carbon.
like a park or something, or
Mm.
and that is, I guess, like capitulating a little bit and saying like, okay, so capitalism seems to be winning. It's the same with the language models. Like we have to bend over, make ourselves legible, because otherwise they're just gonna build a parking lot here. So we have to try to like talk their language so they understand that they will actually lose money if they put a parking lot here. But that's problematic, of course, because it's hard to translate all of that context, and so then you might end up with a parking lot anyway.
Yeah. I was thinking more about in the lines of like when you guys at the beginning of this conversation were talking about how if our community was too legible, then it could like run the risks of being gamed and manipulated. And I think that's totally true. Like, for example, imagine if every time you made a good tweet that one of us liked, you won points or you earned money, or like doing favors, like Swix hosting this. Like if we like paid, if there was an amount of money that we were paying him for doing this, if things were that legible, like it would ruin the whole network, like that would be like an excess of legibility. It'd be so gameable.
Yeah. But there is a lot of that though, Steve. Still, like there's so many people who are, there are so many ways of like extracting wherever there's like a shard of status or legible kind of structures you can climb, there's gonna be people there.
So sure. Like, I guess you could say, like trying to get on the front page of Hacker News, Forbes 30 under 30. I guess that's a perfect example. Forbes 30 under 30 is super legible, and so it entirely became gamified, and fraudsters became it to the point that so many fraudsters have gotten Forbes 30 under 30 that everyone loves to make fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen I saw on a podcast like a VC who I've never talked to said that we were friends. Because he probably like he wants to come across as someone who's friends with me. So that's like strange to me, but like, so that happens, even though it's very unclear to me exactly what is the thing he's getting. Like he's clearly getting something right from pretending to be my friend.
Yeah. True. You're right. That's definitely a thing. Amazing. I love this.
Yeah, I said some notes in the chat. In this chat. Yeah, legibility can be used against you. It can be weaponized. There are people who are much better at legibility than the actual substance that they have. And then also they can use like false signals to draw you in. And this is in nature, which is really, really, really funny. Oh yeah, you
yes.
Okay, go ahead. Goodhart's law.
Yes. Here I'll paste in some of Swix's links, so they're burned into the chat, as he said. But yeah, this reminds me of this principle. I think it has a name, but I forget it. But when a measure becomes a goal, it is no longer a valuable measure. So that's when, like, like in American schools, when or teaching to the test. There are a lot of examples of this throughout the world. Like an excess of legibility. We've made this perfectly legible. Now we're going to optimize and gamify it. Okay, now it's no longer a useful measure. Let's see. What else do I have here that I want to go over? Yeah, I guess. So for Henrik, I think the thing that Swix is saying to you, I heartily agree with. Feel like, except like within reason. Like I think Swix is right that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can like be your beautiful, brave, creative self, in like degrees of privateness or degrees of publicness, and you can like keep you can figure it out, except for the fact of time. If it takes your precious time to be to like do the illegible stuff, to be who you are, and that's all you have time for, you don't have time to be
Yeah, yeah.
legible.
If you're a professional snowflake like I am, it's like it's a full-time job.
Well, yeah, I think it's very reasonable for you to be like, hey, I only have time to be legible or illegible. Like, I don't have time to be both. But I guess one interesting, Swix is someone who's super public, releasing stuff all the time, not very legible, not very legibly. Like, there's a lot of that. But anyways, I'll let Swix speak for himself in a second. But I was going to say, I think a lot about Joe Rogan here as someone who just releases so much content. He so informally, he just turns the mics on and like there's no editing. It just like goes out, but kind of like what we're doing now. So it does feel to me like there is a world in which you can produce a ton of content very publicly and be legible. Yeah, you can have your cake and eat it too. People have figured it out how to do it. Like Swix said.
I would say Joe Rogan obviously has made it, and he has earned the right to have his 3-hour ramble podcast. For me, actually, the move has been to create dedicated channels that are themselves more legible than me. So I create Latent Space Pod that it only does interviews for AI founders and researchers, right? I only do conference, they only do conference talks, right? Like, and those things, like some people don't even know I'm behind it, but that's fine. I'm like that. Those channels are independent entities. They're way more legible than me, so I can just express myself through there, and then like my main self can do whatever I want, including selling those things, which is great. Legibility for sale is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. This has been super fun. I think I might be all talked out. What, do you guys have any final parting words? I guess one thing I'll say, which was the whole point of this chat, which we haven't really got to, is how do we make legibility more legible for other people? I think as champions of this idea, as people who benefited from this idea, I would love to make it more, especially in a medium as a message kind of way. Like, how can we champion legibility if it itself is not legible?
My quick take here on this is like, I think you've just assumed that people should deserve the right to understand what legibility is. And like, well, I'm the man on the street. Why should I care? So I think like, how do you make legibility more legible for other people? Tell them why they should care. And it's not helpful that the most prominent, coiners of the term don't like it.
Of course.
So like, yeah, okay. For them, their why should you care is you should resist the police state, right?
Yes,
But
and
yeah,
for us, it's your thing of increase your luck. Yeah, I feel like that's one way of why you should care that you've talked about. And Henrik this is how you get interesting people to route stuff to your inbox.
pretty much. It seems very basic. It's like basically it just boils down to like personal branding
Yeah.
and whatever.
Yeah. I guess
yeah.
like the Date Me directory, for example, which is taking an embarrassing long time to load right now. That's like the why you should care is you want to meet your dream girl, your dream boy.
Yes. Yeah. So like legibility itself is not a goal; it's a means to an end. And here's a bunch of ends and enables for you, and that's why you should care about legibility. And here are the known flaws, and here are the known countermeasures to those flaws. And now you as a person of free will, you decide how legible you want to make yourself. But like this is a known path that is not taught in schools that like probably you should know because it's probably good for you. And if you don't want to take part in it, sure, but just know that it's a thing.
Totally. Yeah, start with the why. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I still feel like what I want is like legibility.com or legibility.info. I want a landing page that, starts with the why and then, explains a lot of what we said and links out to other resources.
Yeah, I mean, these days, like we've done some
Like
work
we need a
here.
homepage.
Yeah, these days you take the transcript of what we just did and just throw it in and, get it to make a website. Like it's 2 seconds. Like it's not, you know, it's fine. But like the people that I think will am I am I still connected? Okay. The people that will resonate the most have already felt it. They don't have the words for it. So you're giving them the words.
But I find it interesting that there's so many people who do not understand it that would find it useful. I was being interviewed by a Danish journalist yesterday who writes for like a real big magazine in Denmark. Really talented young guy. And I was like, of course, struggles to make a living as a journalist in Denmark. It's like such a small country. It's like, and he doesn't understand, or he didn't know. Like I was explaining to him, like with the skills you have, because he's really talented and he's done like written political speeches for big Danish politicians and so on. Like you could, like if you made yourself legible, earn a lot of money by writing stuff for example, tech founders, and then you could earn a lot of, like. But he doesn't understand that there's like other opportunities if he just makes himself legible online so that people who value his skills can find him and give him a lot of money, and that way he could fund doing more interesting stuff. It's just like it was like totally not on his table that was a way, like, because people like to say that it's a way hard to be a writer, and it's not. It's just like it's hard because you're not legible to the people who would like to pay you for your writing.
Yes.
Because you've
Yeah, exactly. People don't understand that they can take all the ideas from a website that for a business and apply that to themselves as a person. Like I call this, you could think of this as there are job descriptions that companies have, make them self-legible to employees, but then there aren't as many, but there's an increasing phenomenon of hire me docs, kind of like date me docs, where people have a doc. Well, that's what a resume is, kind of. But I'm talking about a resume is very legible, but it misses out on a lot of context. I think a more public hire me doc that explains who you are in context and makes yourself legible to potential employers. That's part of what Henrik you're talking about. But I think but people, you could take it even further. You could be like, here's who I am. Here's the writing idea. Here's what services I provide. Contact me for these sorts of engagements.
And also you can't like divide it from some kind of like, let's say, networking of like moving out into the world, talking to people, finding people, moving through scenes, because you have to understand the language. Like if let's say if you're, it's gonna be for Danish journalist putting something on LinkedIn, they're not gonna attract like tech founders to get, like they have to move through circles to figure out like what kind of stuff are tech founders reading. What kind of stuff are they resonating with? Like, where do I put stuff out such that they send direct messages to me? That is like, there's a lot of knowledge there. So there's a lot of context sort of baked into that. So there's like, it's so interconnected with like, also that act of going out into the world and trying things and talking to people and like gathering context, because like context and legibility are like, you can't separate those things. But like having both of those mindsets of like going out into the illegible mess, which is like, I can't read this at all, but I'm going to go out and look at stuff and try to figure out this jungle. And then once I've understood the jungle, I'm starting to send out signals that are legible to the right parts of the jungle. I think those two skills are super useful, like with the internet.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Like, especially as someone who's, in Europe, not in the tech or startup scenes at all, you've like totally like wormed your way into our network in an amazing way. You're like on the front page of Hacker News all the time. You're in tech Twitter circles. Like, how did you pull it off? Like I can imagine for a random Danish journalist, like it seems impossible to do what you did. Like typically this sort of thing happens by like going to college and you meet all these people and then, you do business with your college buddies kind of thing. Like that's the way you typically infiltrate a network. But with the internet, you can infiltrate a network from the comfort of your home. It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Are we feeling like we're scratching the surface here of what we're trying to say?
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot, and
Yeah, me too.
Like, I feel like someone, hopefully, maybe one of us, maybe someone who listens to this should make a homepage, a legible place to go on the internet to explain legibility. I think that would make me very happy, at least.
Good. That's our legible kind of call to action. We will signal boost it if you do it.
There you go. There you go. Yes, there you go. Yes, there you go. I'm putting into the world exactly what I want. I want legibility.info or like legibility.wtf or .xyz, whatever. You know, I can't specify too precisely because then I'm being too legible and then people will go squat on those domains and charge a lot of money. So anyways, I want an info site at a memorable URL and I want it to be very legible and amazing.
Cool. All right. That's fine.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for
See ya.
setting this up.
Thank you.